Okay, so let's begin with just a couple of practice multiple choice questions before we put cost into everything. So take a look. Based on this data, we have the short run production function for picking apples, how many workers we have, how many bushels of apples they can pick. So what is true about the marginal product of the fifth worker? What do you think it is? Okay, so remember, first of all, before we go further, remember this is showing you total product. Okay, it's showing you total product. The question though is asking you about marginal product. Okay, so you need to go and mentally or on your scratch paper or something on your notes, calculate that marginal product. So from 0 to 1, the marginal product is what? 4. From 1 to 2, it's 5. From 2 to 3, it's 6. 3 to 4, 5, and 4 to 5, 4. So which one is correct? It is D, I think. Less than the marginal product of the third worker due to diminishing return. So it's not. Sometimes we want to think that it's A because we go, oh, 24 is the most. But this is asking about the marginal, not the total. Okay, so you have to be careful with that. But it's less than the marginal product of the third worker because of diminishing returns. So they're able to, we're in diminishing returns right here. The overall total product is increasing, but the marginal product is decreasing. It is decreasing or increasing at a decreasing rate. Okay, all right. That's utility. We know that one. Okay, let's look at this one. Okay, so after which worker does diminishing marginal product first occur? When do we start to see it diminish? Think about that. Okay, which one is it? Fifth. Where? Is that the third worker? Okay, is that the third worker? Because, okay, again, this shows you the totals. This is showing you the total product. You got to think about marginal. Okay, and I'm guilty of that myself. A lot of times I'll forget that. So from the first, when we hire the first worker, the marginal product is 3. It went from 0 to 3. When we hire the second worker, the marginal product is 4. When we hire the third worker, it's 3. So that's where it diminished. It went from 4 to 3. So that's where you're looking for that when that happened at the third worker. And it's always when you're going from that one to the next one. The word, okay. So it's when you hire the third one is when the marginal product, that's how you have to think about that. Yeah, so it's when you hire that third one. So it's not the second one, it's when you hire the third. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go back and now, don't forget the formulas just yet because I'm going to put up what they are too. That's just a weird transitional thing that they're going a little bit too early. Okay. So all of this, what we've looked at right now is just, the total product and all of that. So we're just looking at the production side of it in terms of if we put in this many inputs, how much output are we going to get? And that might cause us to say, oh, we want to hire as many workers as we can as long as the marginal product is still going up or as long as the total product is still going up. But that may not necessarily be the case. Because the other thing that firms have to think about, of course, is the cost of all of that. Because as you add more workers, you are also adding, or other resources, other inputs, you're also adding more cost. So to find that place where firms are maximizing their profit, and ultimately that's where firms want to be. They want to be in that position where they are maximizing their profit. What does that mean if they're maximizing it? as much as they can. Not just where they're making profit, because there's going to be multiple points where they're making profit. There would be multiple varieties of, input variations, input combinations where they could be making profit. But what firms want to know is where could they be making the most profit? And that probably isn't going to be where they're making the most product. Making the most product may not be where they're making the most profit. It may not be where they're making profit at all, because we have to factor in the cost. And so this is where we employ the use of this skill, which you really kind of already know. You've already practiced this when you did marginal utility, this principle of marginal analysis. And again, this is one of the basic, backbone principles in microeconomics, is this analysis, this comparison, this figuring out and weighing the additional benefit of something versus the additional cost of something. Again, we've been talking about this really since the first unit, that any decision we make, we are employing marginal analysis, whether we realize it or not. When we decide that we're going to come to school today as opposed to sleeping in, that's marginal analysis. We weigh the benefits of coming to school versus the cost of, staying in bed, or the other way around. We did this with marginal utility. Is the additional benefit that I'm going to get from consuming one more cookie or going on a vacation one more time, is that going to exceed the cost of doing that, including the opportunity cost? And firms want to know the same thing. So here's how they would phrase that. When it comes to firms and for profit maximization, we're going to phrase that additional benefit specifically as marginal revenue, or as we will abbreviate it, MR. So marginal revenue is the additional revenue, not additional product, but additional revenue, additional income that's going to come in from selling or producing one more unit of a good. So if I'm producing a good that's $5 and I produce one more, that's going to be my marginal revenue, be an additional $5. We can find marginal revenue. It is the change in the total revenue over the change in the quantity, just like marginal utility is the change in the total utility over the quantity, just like the marginal product is the change in the total product over the change in the quantity of labor, or the quantity of that input. Same basic concept, we just sort of change around the context and what we're actually referring to here. So the additional revenue that I bring in, that is my marginal revenue. We're going to weigh that against the additional cost, the marginal cost. The marginal cost is the change in the total cost over the change in the quantity. So for marginal analysis with profit maximization, we're going to weigh that additional benefit over the additional cost, but specifically that means the additional revenue that I'm going to gain from producing that product versus the additional cost that it took for me to make that additional product. That might be the extra worker I had to hire, the more resources I had to invest in, that sort of thing. So here's the rule we will operate under, and this is extremely important. This is like one of the couple of 10 commandments of microeconomics. It's right here. Always, always, always. This is one of the most important rules. Profit maximization rule. And then we'll see this a couple of other places just with some different terminology around it. And you really have kind of already learned this, but it's just, this is the form you're going to see it in the most. Profit maximization rule must remember MR equals MC. You produce to the point where MR equals MC. That is one of the most important principles in micro, MR equals MC. That is the place where profit is going to be maximized, where the marginal revenue equals the marginal cost, or at least where the marginal cost does not exceed the marginal revenue. If you get to the point where the marginal cost exceeds the marginal revenue, then that is no longer profit maximizing. Again, you might still be making profit, but that's not where profit is at its max, where I can be doing the best, where I can be the most efficient as I can possibly be. So ingrain that into your mind. If you remember nothing else, you will come out of here talking about how MR equals MC. Okay, so that again is where our marginal benefit, that's the MR, equals the marginal cost. Okay, the marginal cost of producing that. All right, Now, we also need to understand what some of these things are going to look like graphically and what they're going to show us and why. And this illustrates those principles of how marginal revenue and how marginal costs are going to work. So, our marginal revenue curve, that is just the graph of marginal revenue. It shows us the additional revenue that's being brought in per every unit that's being sold. It shows us the marginal. Shows us the marginal, not total revenue. Total revenue curve is different. So this is showing the additional revenue that is brought in, additional revenue gained for every unit sold. So it's basically just a graph of marginal revenue for that production function. Marginal cost curve shows us how the marginal cost changes for every unit that is sold. It shows us how the marginal cost changes, or what the marginal cost is, the additional cost for every unit that is sold. Now, it's more important than being able to spout out definitions for these. It's far more important that you know what they look like and you know how to use them. So it's really not so much about, because I think you'll, over time, you just get what it means. You get the definition. So it's not so much about spouting off textbook definitions as understanding what these curves look like. Now, marginal revenue curve, in this case, so if the price of something is $5, if I'm selling a product for $5, when I sell one, what's my marginal revenue? $5. When I sell another one, what's my marginal revenue? Another $5. I sell a third one, still $5. So you notice that blue curve right there. What do you notice about it? It's flat, okay? So in many cases, not in all cases actually, we'll look at some later that's not like this, but for the time being, our marginal revenue curve is oftentimes going to be completely flat like that, because every time they sell another unit, they sell the first one, they sell the second one, they're all the same price. So marginal revenue is oftentimes going to be the same as price. Again, that will not always be the case, but that doesn't happen until a little later when we get into some different market structures. But notice here, marginal revenue or equals, see the equals there, price. So marginal revenue for the time being equals the price. So whenever you see the price of the product, whenever it gives you that information, that's going to be the marginal revenue, because every time they sell one, they sell it for the same price. Okay, so there's my marginal revenue curve. Now, marginal cost looks like this. Marginal cost almost always, pretty much always, it goes down and then it comes back up. It looks like a little Nike swoosh. Okay, so marginal cost curve always looks like a little Nike swoosh like that. The reason for that is as we make our we move into that second and third product, the marginal cost goes down suddenly. It will drop suddenly, but then it will start to creep back up. The reason for that is because you're adding more workers, you're able to produce more. Remember how marginal product went up significantly in that first, when you added that second worker, third worker, when that first started happening, as you first started to add inputs, the marginal product of those inputs increased rapidly. Therefore, because they are producing so much more, they're so much more efficient in production, that is going to offset the additional cost of hiring those workers. So that's why the additional cost actually goes down at first. But then it starts to creep back up, because what starts to happen to the marginal product of those inputs as they produce more? What started to happen in the marginal product? It started to eventually do what? Decrease and go down, okay? So as they're able to produce, as we add more workers, they're able to add less and less and less to the equation. And so that means that the cost of those workers eventually starts to not offset the additional revenue that they're being gained, thus the marginal cost starts to go up. Essentially what this is, if you notice, and you won't see this curve too much, this one we do all the time. Marginal costs, get married to it, because you're going to see it from now to the end of the course. But the marginal product one, the marginal product curve, how it went up and down like that and went off the graph, this is the inverse of that. Okay, if you flip that over, that's what you would have, because the two things are mirrors of each other. So as marginal product suddenly goes up and then goes down, marginal cost goes down and then it goes up, and it does that pretty much anytime. Sometimes you will see examples that they may give you problems where it says the marginal cost is constant, in which case you would make it a straight line. But other than that, it's a little Nike swoosh like that, marginal cost, okay? Now, again, what's our profit maximization rule? Where MR equals MC, when the two cross right there. So this point right here, point E, which in this case, this is tomatoes, a quantity of 5 and a price of $18, that is our profit maximization point. So they will be maximizing profit if they produce 5, I think this is bushels of tomatoes, okay? So sometimes we'll find that information graphically by finding where those curves meet, but sometimes it'll be, just looking at the numbers, okay? The MR equals MC right there, when those two things come together, that is your profit maximization point, okay? Okay, let's do this. So let's run through we're going to do a couple of practice examples and try to work through this MR equals MC with a table like this, not graphing it yet, and see if we can't find that profit maximization point. So you can talk to each other here, but on a scratch sheet of paper, you don't have to draw all this out all perfect and everything. I want you to figure the total revenue for output in this case, and then I've got your total cost. So you're going to tell me the profit for each of those as well. Okay, and you can use you can grab a calculator if you want, just to save time. Some of these numbers are not neat clean, so you may grab a calculator to save yourself some time here. So what we're doing here, we're just sort of laying some groundwork to do the MR equals MC thing. But we're going to do this first, so we can sort of check ourselves when we get to that. Okay, so this part's pretty simple. So I know that my price is $2 per cup. So if I'm not selling any, then my total revenue is going to be nothing. Okay, 0. At 1 cup, what's my total revenue? 2, and then 2 cups times $2 is 4, times the 3 is 6, then 8. And then 10, and then 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. And again, I got that. Total revenue is just the price times the quantity. My price is 2, and there's my quantity right there. Then I'm just going to subtract out my total cost. So here, it's -1. Now, why would I have this? Good time to point this out. Why would I have cost even if I'm not producing anything? What? Yeah, and you still have the stand itself, just because you're not, putting out any output, there's still going to be fixed costs. So there's always some kind of cost because of the fixed cost and fixed inputs. And we'll talk more about costs in Module 19, but we'll see that there's always fixed costs. So even when you're at nothing, there's going to be some kind of cost. 2 minus the $1.25, so this is like 75 cents. And then 4 minus the $1.75, I think we're at 2.25. 6 minus 250 is 350. 8 minus 350 is 450. 10 minus 475 is 525. 12 minus 625 is 575. 14 minus the 8 is 6. Okay, 16 minus 10 is 6. And then 18 minus 12, 25. 75, and 20 minus 14, 75, 25. Okay. All right. So I could go through and figure out where my profit maximizing point is like that, but we're going to take that information and then use the marginal revenue and marginal cost to figure that out a different way, and to use this to kind of check it. Okay. So let's do that. Let me see. So questions so far? All right, so now we have that's the same information, a little black and white chart there on the far. That's not what I want. There we go. So the black and white one there on the left, that's what we just did. Now let's go through and find our marginal revenue, our marginal cost, additional profit, which is basically marginal profit, and then determine if we should produce that unit. Are we at a point where our marginal, as long as the marginal revenue is greater than the marginal cost, then we should continue to produce. Okay, so we're going to find that point where the answer becomes no. Okay, let's do that. And you can talk to each other, that's fine.